Hello, hello. What's going on? It's Doug Cunnington here, and we're going to talk about productivity today. Please let me know in the chat if you could hear me. It's always good to confirm that. You never know. Never know with technology. And we're going to go over a couple things. I have a few notes here, of course. We're going to talk about, actually getting stuff done. And it's not clickbait, but I know what could get clicks. So I did name this as productivity hacks. And I don't like the word hacks too much, but we're trying to get clicks here. So had to put it in. Please do hit the thumbs up if you have the opportunity to do so, especially if you know that you watch these all the time. It helps other people find them and all that stuff. Quick shout out as we're rolling in, and I know it takes a few minutes for people to hop on here. So one announcement is you can sign up for email notifications. I know YouTube doesn't always provide the notifications well. So there's a link in the show notes for getting YouTube notifications. Basically, it tags you on my email list, and then I just send out a very short note a couple hours ahead of time to let you know. We have David on. Thank you for being a moderator, saying that you can hear me okay. Thank you. And then Gaz is on as well. You're in a bit of a rush. You just got home from work. And cool. Thanks, everyone, for letting me know. So that is one announcement. I also want to shout out to a couple of our sponsors right up front as we're waiting for people to join. And I do thank the people that watch the replays later. Most people do watch the replays. That's fantastic. I know that you're watching. Leave a comment if you want to. You can ask a question in there. Maybe I'll put it in the next live stream. Odys, that's Odys. You can get premium age domains from them. We'll hear more a little bit later. Niche website builders, they are sponsoring these live streams again. I'm really glad to have them back on board, and you should stay tuned because I'm going to be doing a case study with them. There's going to be several videos we're going to be tracking along over the next few months. And finally, Ezoic. I actually just put Ezoic on one of my sites and got it up and running in, I think it was about 48 hours or so. Pretty impressive how quick everything switched over. And I will potentially be talking about that a little bit in the future. But even if you just started your site, you can join Ezoic. There's no page view minimum, and there's a link in the show notes so you can get into their program where, what do we call that these days? Access Now. You can get into their Access Now, and you could use their product Leap to help your site load faster. So thanks to all the sponsors, really do appreciate it. It makes these live streams possible. So Gaz has an interesting topic for today. And Cheesecake does say the replays are useful. You could always check it out later. Awesome. So today we are talking about productivity, and I'm going to start getting into it. I have a few general ideas that I want to go over, and I mentioned that I don't like the, productivity hacks, but I put it in the title here, so I'm part of the problem. I gotta get people to click these, otherwise it's pointless. So the hacks and the tips and tricks and using a new app, they may or may not work. Simplicity is really key, and most likely if you get a new app or you're like, okay, there's this new to-do app, and there's so many of them out there, like it really, honestly, it's not going to make a huge difference for you. You may have some short-lived enthusiasm for a new app, and if you don't change how you're doing your work and how you're prioritizing things, it's probably not going to make a difference in the long run. It's kind of like going on a diet in January or starting to exercise more in January. And maybe you keep it up for a couple weeks, but you gravitate back towards your normal state. And you have to think about things differently. So that's kind of what we're going to talk about today. The microphone's really close. Sometimes I hit it. Just move it back away just a little bit. And it goes further, right? You also hear about the morning routines, and they can be helpful. And I think technically I've kind of eased into a morning routine over the past, say, 5 years or so. It's coffee, going for a walk outside, probably some, light exercise. I go up and down with the amount of exercise I do in the morning before I start any work, but generally the more exercise I do before working, the better the day is, generally. But you also hear people that are like, yeah, you got to wake up and do affirmations or something, or make your bed. That's the one that I love. It's like, make your bed, it'll change your life. It's fucking bullshit, You got to do other stuff, like you can make your bed and then be a very unproductive person. I used to often make my bed, maybe not perfect, but I'd pull the sheets back up, and turns out over the last several years, I've been way more productive, and I generally do not make my bed. It literally doesn't matter if it somehow helps you in an artificial, like a placebo effect, like if making your bed somehow makes you more productive for the rest of your day, that's great. But I would largely say that it doesn't make a difference at all. If it artificially helps you somehow, but my hunch is making your bed will make no difference at all. It's probably good to not jump into social media or looking at your email, but I do that probably 50 to 75% of the time. So those are a couple things that are probably not going to make a huge difference. And I think if you're in a spot where you're like, oh man, I really I need to get this app because it'll make all the difference, that's when you got to look out, So, okay. I'm going to hop over to the chat. Laughing Hyena, what's going on? And Cheesecake says, isn't it better to rank in Google SEO with a straightforward video title? Sure, probably. There's a lot more to it than that, but I'm not generally trying to do these videos to rank in Google, but yeah, especially this one. From a ranking in Google perspective, a live stream is probably going to do horrible. It's far too long and far too all over the place. Live streams, because we have the great interaction with the audience here, they're all over the place. And a video that ranks well in Google will typically be pretty short and to the point. So this one is not really meant to rank in Google. Okay, so let's get into some of the productivity ideas here. And I will go ahead and read out some of Gaz's stuff since it's kind of relevant here. It says, I think the main hack is to push yourself, be disciplined and focused. And you're reading a great book at the moment about valuing your time and not sit around wasting it. If you have a spare hour, do some keyword research. Yeah. Okay. So a couple things here. I made the point that, using a specific app or whatever is not going to make a difference. Is how you view the work that you're getting into. So one of those things is figuring out what's important to work on and will get you closer to your goal. So it does assume that you have some goal. We are talking about working online here, and generally on the channel, we do talk about affiliate marketing or content websites, and you're generally doing something related to your website. So with that in mind, some of the very important themes that we talk about all the time are publishing content and then promoting your site or getting backlinks in some way. So most of your activity should generally be around those. Sure, there's some infrastructure stuff that you have to think about, like hosting or your WordPress theme or your site speed or something like that. Those are important, but generally it's probably going to be 10 to 15% of your time or thought. And once you have those problems solved, you probably don't need to go back to them over and over again. So it's very small amount of your effort once you are in a maintenance mode. So when you think about those two main areas, you could think about, like Gaz was saying, find some keywords, and then you have to get the content written. Like those are your main activities. For the link building, there's multiple strategies. Maybe you're doing some networking over time where you're making contacts in the industry and then potentially working to get a link or do a guest post or something like that. So most of your activities are around that. Those are the important ones. Publishing more content is probably, for most people, one of the most important things you can get into. So with that in mind, you don't want to get distracted with a bunch of other things. Like maybe you heard about this new plugin that really helps you do X, Y, or Z, or, maybe one of the worst time wasters is like a plugin or something that changes the formatting, but effectively doesn't really change the content or improve it. It doesn't help you publish more. It doesn't help you rank better. It doesn't help anything specifically. It's just sort of a superficial, like rebranding of your site, for example. Or one of the others that people spend a lot of time on. I had a friend, very good friend, who he was talking about opening a brewery. He and his friends brewed beer all the time. They had a great, fun time brewing beer, and they all had big ideas. They were actually all very successful in their corporate jobs, but they had big ideas. They wanted to have a brewery, and they wanted to hire people to do everything. And they got really excited, and they got T-shirts made, and they got logos. They filed trademarks. They did a lot of things that look like running a business, to the point where people came up to them at festivals and stuff, and they were like, "Hey, what brewery is that?" And they're like, "Oh, we're just home brewers. Like, we're probably going to open up soon." Of course, they never did, because they were just messing around, making some T-shirts and doing some branding and stuff. And I am bad at branding. Like, I'm far on the other end. But you may have noticed that I don't have a logo. I don't have a logo on my website. And I don't have T-shirts or mugs or other shit like that. Maybe it helps with branding a little bit, but I'm doing fine. I have no problems because I don't have a logo or a T-shirt or whatever. And there are people that have businesses, and then they develop those extra branding things. So don't be fooled by things that are, feel like they're moving you forward, but really it's not getting you closer to your goal. Remember, the idea that I started at there was, if you want to make some progress, you have to move towards your goals. And if you need to publish content on your website, a fucking T-shirt or a mug is not going to help you. I've seen a lot of people waste time. And again, it feels good. People are impressed. They're like, "Oh, you got T-shirts and stuff." And it really doesn't matter. And I was going to say, I have another podcast, and my podcast co-host, my partner, Carl, he's he's created a couple T-shirts and people like them. But from where I'm sitting, I'm like, we need more listeners. We need to market this and promote it. You don't have a business if you don't have customers. So that's a big deal. Okay. So focus on what's important. And I'll probably tell Carl, "Hey, these T-shirts are great. People actually do like them. But we need to come back to the marketing side, and we need to look at what makes a difference." And that sort of thing doesn't. Okay. Once you have arrived at some of those very important tasks, just like guys mentioned here, you have to be, focused. And you mentioned discipline. And actually I have a post-it note here for a topic. Hopefully this will focus for a topic for my other podcast soon. And it's motivation versus discipline versus habits. I lean heavily on habits. I think I'm fairly disciplined, but your ability to be focused and disciplined, I think it declines through the day. So I may start off really strong in the morning, and then by the afternoon, I just can't do it. I just can't stay focused. Some people may be able to push through a little longer, and certainly some caffeine will help you. But at some point, you reach a point where you should probably take a break. You should probably just take a little break there. So I am not sure if discipline, works well for certain people, and then they're able to just stick to it. It's so easy to get distracted, and I'm going to come to that in a second. Now, the motivation, some people may be in a spot where they really hate their job, and that is very motivating. Or you're in a position where maybe you just got laid off and you really don't want to get a job again, and that can be highly motivating. That was the position that I was in when I got laid off. I really did not want to get a job again. So that was really motivating. And I was chatting with a friend a few weeks back. He has a good job, very flexible. He works from home. He's in a position where he doesn't have to deal with a lot of people that he doesn't want to deal with. It's a cushy job. It's good. He likes it. And he doesn't have the motivation to work on a website because it's not bad enough for him in his normal position. If he had a new boss that was terrible to work for, that could be really helpful to motivate him. And for me, I think habits are probably the best because I could just, make sure I put myself into like some position, some environment. I like default to the productivity side of things. So, quick example, I am fortunate to have like the home office and studio down here. And generally, when I come down here, I do work. Not always. Occasionally, you see a guitar behind me. Occasionally, I play guitar. But generally, I'm doing work. So when I come down here, I know I do some work. Now, if this setup, if my office was just my laptop, anytime I see my laptop, I may default to start working, which could be upstairs in front of the TV, which I don't want to do that. If I'm not working, I don't want to be partially engaged and distracted from the other stuff that I'm working on. So the habits are really helpful for me, and it actually goes all the way to exercising and stuff like that too. We have a elliptical machine down here and a couple weights and some exercise bands and some other stuff. And that is an area where in the morning when I go down there, I will exercise. That's what I do. Run around here with Georgie, tries to play with me whenever I'm exercising. It's kind of funny. So we'll run back and forth here a little bit. And then I'll hop back on the elliptical or do push-ups or whatever kind of exercise I'm doing. So habits work really well for me. And I'm going to jump over to the chat. Thanks for the other folks that hopped on and that hit the thumbs up. Definitely appreciate it. So got a couple questions here. If they are unrelated to productivity, I will skip them and I'll come back to them later. So I didn't forget. Just sticking to the topic and then I'll come back to them. Peak says, what helps you is noting that the hours you've worked. It prevents you from working too little, but also too much. We need breaks. And that's when I watch YouTube. Yes, breaks are very important. And one of the very specific analogies that I have is long distance running. And there's a technique that people use for probably like 10Ks and beyond. And I did this when I was running a lot more. Basically, you run for some amount of time and then you walk for some amount of time. So it might be you run for 5 minutes and then you walk for 30 seconds. And you do that through the whole half marathon. That's what I did. So you do that routine through the whole half marathon. And you might be thinking when you first start off, well, you're not tired. You don't need a break. You only ran for 5 minutes and you're barely warmed up. And if you skip that break, it's actually going to hurt you at the end. And it's very like through training, right? You can very easily see that. So it's super important to take those breaks early on, and it helps manage your energy level throughout the whole race or the whole day. So peak, yeah, if you have a routine where, maybe like Pomodoro, right? Like that could be really effective for people. I think you work for like 23 minutes and take like a 5-minute break, something like that, roughly that amount of time. And you force yourself to take those breaks, even if you feel like, hey, it's my first hour of working. I don't need to take a break, but it's really important to take those breaks, and it helps you manage your energy through the day. I have the tendency to do too much and not take those breaks, but the converse is I can focus really hard for 3-4 hours. After that, my brain's tired and I need to take a break. And if I do take multiple breaks, like through the 3 or 4 hours, maybe I could work a little longer. But sometimes if I'm in the groove and I don't want to get distracted, then it's really helpful for me to push through. The other problem, and this could be like in, an office environment, but here specifically, like my wife works from home as well. And this has been an ongoing struggle. I've gotten better with it. And I'm actually curious if other people have this problem that work from home. So I'm doing my thing. Maybe I'm in the zone and I've been working for a couple hours. My mind is thinking about whatever it is I've been working on. And then I go run upstairs to get more coffee, for example. And then she thinks I'm taking a break and she's like telling me about some other thing, completely distracts me from whatever it is that I was working on, whatever I was thinking about, because she thinks I'm just taking a break, but I'm not. I'm like actively working. So really, I just need a kitchen down here. So I can just like do whatever I need to do and no one will bother me. But it's just distractions. And I mean, if you work in an office environment, that could happen all the time. All right, Michael's on. What's going on? Burhan, what's up? Gaz also says, what drives you crazy is the fact that the work you put in for your site, and it's not a boss, it's your time, not your indentured time. Yeah. Okay. And like I said, if you're asking questions that are unrelated, I'll come back to it later and save those for the end. Michael mentions that t-shirts and mugs and swag in general are so gimmicky. And the thing is, I rarely wear clothing that has like logos on it in general. Usually I'm just wearing like plain stuff, or we've been getting a lot of like custom t-shirts that are inside jokes from like TV shows. So like Arrested Development or Parks and Rec or Better Call Saul. I have a shirt related to that. So it's a little tough sometimes. And then companies are getting better. So like Ezoic, sponsor of the live stream, they get very nice t-shirts and it's soft. And what you don't want to do is get t-shirts made that are uncomfortable, because no one's going to want to wear those. I don't even want to wear my own shirt if it's uncomfortable. So you got to make sure. And I've had some like this where I don't even like the company, but it's so comfortable that I wear it anyway. So that's what you want to do with those. But yeah, generally people don't want more junk. All right. Okay, so Minaj has a great question, which I'll come to in a moment. So I'm going to talk about a couple of the things to work on. So number one, figure out what's most important to help you get to your goal. Don't get distracted by other stuff. Focus on those pieces that will help you make a difference. Things that actually get you closer to your goal. If it's like something that could potentially help, probably ignore it, because there should be, 1 to 3 things that are definitely going to work. And then everything else, ignore it. Secondary things, ignore it. There's going to be a million distractions. And if you're, working on these content websites, there are unfortunately marketers like me and all my peers out there that are selling something, right? They're trying to get you to use a new plugin or something that solves maybe a minor problem. Maybe it's not even an actual problem, but they make it seem like it's a problem. They try to sell you something, and then you have to install and implement and that sort of thing. And this actually goes to, let's talk, specific, you know, I won't mention, actually, I could use an example because I'm not going to disparage any of these. So there are multiple plugins that help you manage your affiliate links. Lasso is one of them. Links Pro is one of them. AAWP is another one. They're all fine. They all work fine. They help people add links. If you migrate, let's say you have a site and there's 50 pages and half of them have those affiliate links. If you migrate from one of those tools to another one, chances are you're going to have to do a bunch of work to migrate it over. And that applies to almost any sort of migration, technology migration. So if you're moving to a new hosting company, they say, hey, we'll move it over. It'll be easy. We'll transfer everything. I can almost guarantee you that something is going to break. It'll be something small, but there's going to be something that they didn't do or that you didn't do that you should have. And there's going to be some little issue with your email or your email server or something, your DNS, like something is going to cause a little problem if you move from one theme to another, and on and on. So any technology, there's going to be some little thing that breaks. So even if you're like, it's going to be easy to move over, it's going to be harder than you think. It's going to take longer than you expect it to. So it's really important to just ignore those things. And if one of those plugins is working fine, you probably should just stick with it. Migrating to another one, you're not going to get the right cost benefit if it's not like much, much cheaper, or it completely like blows the other tool out of the water. And that's rare. Most of this stuff is a commodity. In fact, someone recently said, hey, you should ask every person you have on the show what hosting they use. And the person is struggling with hosting, so they were looking for advice. But hosting is a commodity. Like you can just, that problem is solved. Like some people like certain companies over others, but it really doesn't matter. They're all probably not, 90% are running on Amazon Web Services. It's pretty much the same. It basically doesn't matter. Okay. So really important to just ignore the stuff that doesn't get you closer to your goal. And the worst ones are the ones that are very, very close to being a good idea. The bad ones, those are easy to ignore, but you'll probably struggle with the ones that are good but not great activities to work on. So one of the ones that I always go down the rabbit hole on these is website speed, because I kind of enjoy improving the website speed, and it's something where you can get instant feedback. That's why I enjoyed software development to some extent. You can work through a problem and then, debug and slowly make your way through solving problems along the way. When you improve your site speed, you can do that. You can test the speed, find the next bottleneck, fix the bottleneck, keep moving down until you have a very fast site. Well, at some point, I had a site that was fast enough. I didn't need it to load any faster, but I just kept trying to optimize that, last 3% or something like that. So it loads in half a second. It didn't matter. Like once it was under a certain, you know, 1 second or something, that's pretty good. Like that's faster than most other websites and you don't need to worry about it. So I have a couple other ideas here, but I do want to hit some questions. So I know a lot of people just hopped on, so I will mention if you want to get notifications for these live streams, there's a link in the description here. You are tagged on my email list, so I'll send you a notification, usually like an hour or two ahead of time. All right. Gaz says, your current site has some competition, but you know a lot about the hobby and you just challenge yourself to step it up and you know you could do a better job. And you're so focused in the moments, you've lost 16 pounds and you're in the zone. Yeah, everything is going right for you. That's great. Keep it up. All right. Minaj says, when you have multiple projects, how to manage them. So I want to know some of the like different projects that you're working on. And I'll give you a couple of ideas here. So number one, I'll come back to this in a deeper way in a second. But if you have too many things going on, it's just going to be stressful. Like you can use some tools to help you keep things organized. But generally, if you have multiple projects, it's just going to be more things that your brain has to juggle. And you will be stressed out, not just when you're working, but when you're not working as well. This is one of the reasons why I have tried to reduce the number of projects that I work on generally. So how to manage multiple projects. It's great if you can have sort of a dashboard where everything is listed out. Again, I was talking about how the tools don't matter. They really don't. Use a spreadsheet if you want to. Use a couple spreadsheets if you want to, or multiple tabs on one spreadsheet. I use Trello for a lot of the stuff that I work on now. Asana is fine. I'm sure there's other solutions. Again, these are also basically commodities too. These problems are solved. You don't have to like recreate the wheel. None of them are super unique in a certain way. Like a lot of them do the same things. If you have sort of everything in one place, you don't have to hunt around. So make it easy to see the status of where anything is. The other part is, personally for me, I do much better if I can focus pretty hard on one thing. If I could do like a week, that's great, but you may have to split up your time where maybe a third of your day you're working on this, and then another third on that, and then another third on that. I do much better if I can just have one sort of continuous time period where I'm focusing on something. So maybe it's like 2 or 3 days I'm just working on a podcast, just one podcast, maybe several episodes, but I'm just focusing, getting things underway there. Then I don't have to switch my context and framing. I could just move forward with that. We don't always have that luxury, especially let's say you have a couple personal projects that you're working on, and then you have a couple professional that you're working on too. So, I mean, you may have to split it up. One thing you can do is, work on a sprint kind of idea where you're focused on one thing for a little while. Or what I did when I had a full-time job, I wanted to work on my stuff when I was most effective. So I woke up early. I woke up at 4 a.m. for probably, off and on for about a year or so. So I got my best 2 hours of work for my project. And then I did my normal morning stuff. And then I could, coast through the day and do the work for the corporate job. And it wasn't my best work, but it didn't, sadly, it didn't need to be. I could do like a half-assed job and it was fine. That's all those things needed. Half the time you're just sitting on a fucking call that didn't matter anyway. So that was helpful. So if you are working on a personal project, you can carve out your best time to work on that. If you're a night owl, you could do it that way. But I mean, I think even, well, you know what? I'm not a night owl. So it may be more effective for you, the night folks, to just, do your thing through the day. And then whenever it's time to work on your project, maybe you're most effective in the middle of the afternoon, and maybe you could work on your project then. But overall, if you have a ton of projects that you're working on, there's no shortcut. Your brain can only handle so many things that you're working on. You can try to use a tool to help things out, but when it comes down to it, even if you can manage all that stuff and you have a nice dashboard, you're going to be more stressed out. All right, I'm going to catch up on the chat here. Laughing Hyena says, the best motivator for me is that you don't have to listen to any boss and you don't have to waste the best years of your life for a soulless corporation. Yeah, that's well said. Oh, John says, excellent podcast. Yeah, appreciate it. And I'll actually give a plug for my podcast. I have two of them. One, I talk about topics like affiliate marketing called The Doug Show. The other one is personal finance and financial independence. It's called Mile High 5. There's links in the description here so you can check it out. All right. Yeah. Laughing Hyena says, if anyone is struggling with motivation, they should watch Office Space by Mike Judge. It's the alternative if you do not start writing now. Yeah, that is one of my favorite movies. And I think it should be, I think we're probably going to talk about it sometime in a future podcast episode. It's definitely on my list. And Gaz is motivated because it's a niche that you're interested in. That's why I often recommend people, you don't necessarily have to be passionate, but you should be a little bit interested. All right. Chris is on. What's happening? And so we're going here. Okay. And Cyprian says, you found out updating name servers helped quite a lot, improving the site speed. Interesting. I haven't heard that. All right. And Gaz says the last Doug show with Mike was brilliant. Yeah, from Below Average Blogger. That was a very good show. All right. I'm going to take a little break, let my voice rest. And in the meantime, we'll hear a quick word from our sponsor, Odys Global. And I just have to find the video here. Where the heck did I put that thing? There we go. This should be the right one. Yeah, so Odys Global. Word from our sponsor, Odys Global. They're the source for premium age domains. The featured domain for today is artguide.org. It's old. It is very old. It's 26 years old, and it is about art in the UK. And it featured museum guides, artists, events, maps, and a forum, all dedicated to art lovers in Britain and Ireland. So there's a lot of referring domains over here. Basically, we're dealing with 224 referring domains. And let's see the do follow. Got quite a few, 181. And we're talking bbc.co.uk, ucla.edu, looks like maybe Wisconsin, WISC, Tripod, and so on. There's a lot of links. And the cool thing, I think, with this specific domain is you could definitely go very deep with informational topics. There's probably all sorts of questions about specific museums and what to see there. Further, you potentially could monetize by partnering with tour guides or other people that do earn money through the art industry. So I think that is very powerful, especially when you think about the commissions that you may be able to get from real live tours and people that are giving those tours. So they want business, so you could probably refer them over. Plus, if you're into art, which I think that would be the best person to get this kind of domain, you could feature artists that you really like, maybe local artists, and you can feature events and partner with these events to potentially be a co-host, but you could actually just talk about them and people would look for that information, like what art events are going on in the next couple weeks or this weekend or whatever. So definitely worth checking out. And you could hop over to Odys, and if you join using my affiliate link, you can get $100 into your account, which I greatly appreciate if you use my affiliate link, because I potentially would get a commission if you end up buying anything. So thanks to Odys. And if you dig these live streams, hop over and just browse around. Let them know that you appreciate that they sponsor these live streams. All right, so I'm going to answer some more questions coming up in a second. And I do see that Chris is on. Chris, what's up? You just got out of a meeting, so welcome. I'm going to talk to you later today, Chris. I have that on the calendar. I think you accepted that meeting invite. So before we answer more questions, and I know there were some that I skipped before, I have a course out. So I did talk about people marketing stuff, and then I made fun of them, and then I'm going to do that right now. But I do have a productivity masterclass, and I don't talk about it much, but it's open for enrollment this week. And there's going to be a bonus, and the bonus is 20 minutes of coaching with me. So we can talk about whatever you wanted. It can be productivity focused. It could be about your site or whatever. And the bonus expires this Friday at 11:55 p.m. Mountain Time. So you can check it out. There's a link in the show notes here. And this is a sort of quick course. There are a few units, 4, I believe. There are a few hours of material. It's not dripped out. You get it all at once. So you literally could buy it, go through the material in about a few hours. Now, it will probably take you, I would say, a weekend to get your ideas together. And there's no shortcut in this course. To be productive and get things done, you have to do work. And this course helps you organize your thoughts and get things down into focus. It's not, there's no trick. There's no trick behind it. It helps you get your shit together a little bit. So do check it out. And another reminder, if you want to get notifications for these live streams, you could sign up for the email list here. All right. So one thing I got to do, I haven't been doing these overlays. I mean, we have this great technology here where I could do an overlay and I never use it. So you can sign up for my email list there. You can check out my podcast, The Doug Show. It's over here on this side. It's backwards for me. So you can sign up for the email list. I send you all my templates and stuff like that. I can get rid of this overlay. And then the fun overlay that I have been forgetting to use is this niche website builders, which I can put it right here, and then I can stand up a little taller so it doesn't block me. So basically, niche website builders is an agency, and they have a deal for you if you sign up using my affiliate link there, which we're restructuring things. I don't know if that's an affiliate. I may or may not get a commission. I have no idea, but they're sponsoring these live streams. That's the point. And they were sponsoring this Q&A segment. So I'm going to answer some questions now. So Minaj says, yeah, you have 2 affiliate sites and you're working on a few client projects. They're not affiliate though. Okay, that makes sense. And what I'm going to do, I'm just going to make this a little bit smaller. There's a link in the show notes for niche website builders. And Mark and Adam are going to be on the show here before too long again. So yeah, you got a couple projects, and Minaj is saying you're thinking to outsource some of the tasks to save time. Yeah, that's a good one. Like if you could outsource some stuff, then you're buying back time, right? So when you get to a spot where you can buy back some of your time, is one of the best investments that you can make is to get other people to do stuff that you don't enjoy or that you don't want to do for some reason, or that's really time consuming. I think I was ranting on my podcast in the last week. I'm not sure if the episode's out yet, but basically I was drafting a blog post, and halfway through I was like, oh man, this is so boring. I gotta get out of here. This is nuts. And, I was like, all right, I just got to finish it. It's not like I'm doing 50 of them. I was just doing one. And I finished in like 8 minutes. But as I was doing it, I was like, oh man, this is terrible. This is terrible. But at one point, I thought it was kind of fun to draft content like that. But, nowadays it is certainly less exciting for me. All right. Laughing Hyena says, you like the interviews with bloggers or informational? Yes, I have. I have not like realized for the first time, but earlier this year, I was doing some interviews with more entrepreneurship kind of people. It was more just general business related, and people were far less interested. They were, the funny thing is, there's a sweet spot in people creating content out there for this space. What people like, and actually in the chat and in the comments later, please, confirm or let me know that I'm wrong on this. People are very interested in early stories, early success stories where people are making $3,000 or less, something like that. People that are making like 30K per month, people don't give a shit. It's unrelatable. 10K a month, 15K a month, like you're starting to get to the point where most people can't see how they get from where they are right now to 10K a month. So the content like definitely is more popular and it skews to the more relatable stuff. Logically, totally makes sense. So, a couple of the interviews, it was like, so and so hit $1 million of revenue in 18 months. Most people were like, I don't think I could, I don't even know what you're talking about. Like, it's crazy. It's generally unhelpful. There's a handful of people that do find it interesting, and some of those are inspirational in some capacity. It helps you see what you can do. But most people want content from people like Mike, or we talked to Ariel the other day, maybe a little early for her to be on this, but those are far more interesting for most people most of the time. All right. My question, this is Gaz, my question for tonight, with some plugins now being available to help with pages not indexing, do you use any of these on a brand new site or just leave it in the sandbox? Just leave it in the sandbox. I mean, I think everyone has, people have been complaining a lot about the indexing issue. And I mean, I think there is an issue. I mean, it's been around for a while. I have a feeling the only way to get around that is to drive. This is based on nothing. All right. This is me speculating. My hunch is if you could drive traffic to that page, you will probably get it indexed. How can you drive traffic there if it's not indexed? Well, obviously not via SEO. So you have to look to social media, most likely. And I'm pretty sure if you get traffic to the page, Google will see traffic is going to that page and they're like, oh, maybe we should index that thing. Probably, right? If you're getting traffic from some other source, that also means there's a link going to it. Even if it's no follow, if there's traffic going to it, that's great. So what can you do? You know what? I'm not sure. One thing that, just off the top of my head, if you did some sort of like forum link building, a lot of times forums will be no follow. However, a lot of times forums will drive traffic if it's a forum with a lot of visitors. Some number of people are going to hop over and check out what someone posted about. And I'm not big on like forum link building, but my hunch is it could be effective. I mean, I haven't even done it before, but if you are trying to get traffic in to your site, to those pages, I would say, social is probably the way to go. Anyone have thoughts on that? Yeah, so I generally haven't worried about like pages not indexing. I just keep publishing more and more content and get more and more links. Also, and I know guys, you're not a link building fan or proponent, or at least you're not spending time on it. which is totally fine. But with the site that I worked on, it stayed in the sand, or sites that I have worked on, and I'm thinking of one in particular, stayed in the sandbox for 9 or 10 months, but I was building a lot of links. And when it got out of the sandbox, things really popped after that. And I don't have any issues indexing at this point in time. Oh, Michael says, what is my method for determining a domain's age? I think you can look up the who is information, right? And see when it was first created. Michael, let me know the follow-up on that. So you may be asking if you have a new site and you bought the domain 3 years ago and you didn't start publishing until a year ago, what's the age on that? And for that scenario, I would say it's a year old. I count the age as when it started to be active and you're publishing content on it. All right. So Laughing Hyena says, what do I think about SEO tool group buying? If there's any SEO tool group buy, blah, blah, blah. I would say fuck group buying. That is a form of stealing. And, people work on this software and there's companies behind it and you shouldn't do group buys. So I would say fuck the group buys. You shouldn't participate in them. All right, Chris says, good point about certain content being more relatable versus inspirational. Yep. Yeah, and I think I think it was just the interviews that I did at the time and scheduling and how everything worked out. But basically I published probably 3.5 weeks in a row of 2 inspirationals, and the headlines were fine, but it was almost like too much and potentially the wrong demographic. So God says, and you enjoy listening how people went from 0 to 5K a month. Those are relatable. Yep. And those are kind of perfect. And usually those are, close enough, not always, but those are close enough for people to understand and they can see or relate to the path. God says, can you use the Wayback Machine for a site's age? Potentially. I haven't investigated that as a reliable way to do it, but the who is information does tell you when it's registered and a couple other pieces of information like that. So yeah, thanks to Niche Website Builders for hopping back on as sponsors. And we have really cool stuff that we're going to be working on in the next few months. So I'm excited to get into that. Oh, and Marcel says you enjoy the pod with the Tropical MBA. Yeah, so if people didn't check that out, I should have mentioned it earlier. But actually, maybe I'll do a quick video on getting on that podcast. But yeah, Tropical MBA, one of my favorite shows, one of the ones I listened to from the very beginning back in 2013. And I was on the show last week. I talked about affiliate marketing. And interesting thing, Dan mentioned, he's one of the hosts. So Dan mentioned that most of the audience, 80% of the Tropical MBA audience, are already business owners. They are running their own business. But one of the most common questions that they get, or a very, very common question that they get, is around affiliate marketing and these content kind of websites. So that's what I talked about in the show. And it's great to be on the show, that one of the ones that got you started. And, I don't listen to Smart Passive Income anymore. I haven't checked it out in a while. I mean, there may be some topics that are more relevant to me, but at some point, I heard enough of the stories and I kind of got the point, and I wasn't as interested in Smart Passive Income. I should check it back out. It's been, I don't know, 3 years, and I haven't listened to SPI in a while. Okay. Michael says, follow up for the domain age. The question is really around the factors like pages that used to exist 15 years ago. There was a potential deregistration, re-registration, etc. Seeing a lot of claims. Okay. Yeah. And you know what, Michael, I am not super familiar with like those. So one of the like the domain we just talked about, I can't remember. It's pretty old, right? So there's some where maybe they did have like ups and downs. So I'm not sure how I would classify it. I would potentially look at, the links and what they're pointing at and like how relevant those links are still today. So I would probably look at the original dates and then make some assumptions along the way. The interesting thing is that I think if you got, let's say you got a domain that was like 15 years old and it was largely inactive for the last few years, I think you may run into a period where you have to like reestablish the domain with like publishing new content and getting fresh backlinks and stuff like that. So I think you could probably recover it and then make those older backlinks like more valuable and powerful again. But I wouldn't be surprised if there was some component of like reactivity, if that makes sense. Again, pure speculation based on stories and anecdotes from other people, but that kind of makes sense to me. All right, and Laughing Hyena asks guys about a keyword research tool, and you're using low fruits. Yeah. Okay. Guys says, for my portfolio, what's the longest period I endured before it started to take off? I think it was the one I mentioned, like most recently. So back in the day, I mean, you could rank a site much faster, but in more recent times, that's probably more relevant anyway. But yeah, it took about 10 months before there was appreciable traffic. And then once 1 year hit, then it really took off pretty well. And niche website builders and I are going to be working on adding a pretty significant amount of content. I think roughly doubling it. So I think there are about 200 articles now, and we're going to add about 200 more. And I have it written down on my little pad over here that I will potentially and most likely hire a couple writers myself to just write a couple articles per week or so, just because as I'm looking at the growth and I'm looking at the way I want to approach it, I can, hire a couple more writers just to get a little bit more content, not publishing quite as much as niche website builders, but still over the course of a long period, that would be perfect. And it won't be like a huge like management component for me to handle. I could just have my VA work on the drafts and the other stuff that I would need her to do. And then just have the couple writers, not a huge amount, just a little bit, maybe 10 or 15 articles per month on the side as well. All right. And quick note on the question about keyword research tools. That's another thing that, I use KW Finder most of the time, but I also use Ahrefs. Generally, just find the tool that you like and then use that. Again, it's something where the specifics, like you may like one tool a little bit more than another, so use that one. But you're probably not going to have like a big change in your results or a huge impact by just using a different keyword research tool. It's probably not going to make a difference. Same with like hosting. Unless your hosting company is just absolutely terrible, it's probably not going to make a difference at all switching over to a new host. That said, if you're on undersized hosting, like you just have the cheapest hosting and you're getting quite a few visitors, you're getting 50,000 visitors a month or something, you probably need to upgrade your hosting, right? And if you go to another host, it'll probably perform better because they're going to size you into the right server and the right plan. So if you're in a hosting company and you're struggling, maybe check to see if you need to upgrade to a non-shared or a more semi-dedicated type situation. So instead of 700 other websites running on the same server, there's like 6 or something like that. That makes a huge difference. Chris says, good news. I gave up on my first niche site years ago, but I did find some good writers and I contacted one and he's still writing, hashed out the details and he starts writing for your new site next week. Perfect. Great. And I'm going to jump back to the productivity stuff. Before I do, I see we have 26 people on here. We have 16 likes. So I think we could do better because one of those likes is at least from me. So if you haven't, thumbs up, please do. And if you're watching the replay, hit the thumbs up. We're supposed to say it, they tell us it helps. So a couple final thoughts. I'm going to summarize again. So of course you have to figure out your goal. I'm assuming you want to have a website and you want to earn money from your website. So you probably need to publish content. So one of the most important things you could work on is content. And you may have to find keywords first. And then you may have to find writers, and then you have the content written, or you have to write it yourself. So those are like a no-brainer to work on those activities. So don't get distracted on other things that may or may not be helpful, like switching to another theme or moving to another hosting company where you're not really making a big difference. And there's, many other activities that are very related, there are many other activities that are not related to content that you can get distracted on. Ignore the other stuff. There's going to be many distractions, so stay focused. Minaj was asking about working on multiple projects, and I think we're all kind of like this. I have, for example, an engineering background. I'm a computer engineer and I worked in the IT area. I'm a project manager, PMP. So one would think I'm highly productive and I have the technical background and I know a little coding and stuff. So you'd think that I should be able to do stuff faster or better or shortcut the learning curve because I'm smart. Well, you can't. And I've run across many smart people. And sometimes you just have to put the reps in and put the time in. There's no shortcut. Now, if you came from like a adjacent industry, maybe you're a writer. Maybe you can write very quickly and you're a very good communicator. You might be able to hop in and do much better on the content writing portion of it. But generally, you're not going to be able to shortcut things, even if you're very, very smart. I'm sorry to let you know, but you're just going to have to put in the time. You know what? It is kind of like training for some athletic endeavor, like training for a half marathon. You may have been a good athlete in college or something like that, but it's years later and you're going to have to start doing a 5K first and like slowly build up your endurance and skills. And it's just going to take some time. Related is you may also think I'm so smart and I'm so productive and I'm so organized that I actually can work on 10 projects at a time. You might be able to pull it off for a little while, but it definitely will be more stressful. So I would say, don't fool yourself. If you're splitting your attention, you will not be able to make the same progress as if you focus up. The other area that I didn't mention before is to limit your inputs. So unfortunately, I'm going to shoot myself in the foot here and say, you may want to stop watching YouTube, stop listening to so many podcasts, stop reading so many blogs, Stop doing so much research and just get to fucking work. Like sometimes you just have to do the work and there's no shortcut. Yeah, you may get some ideas and blah, blah, blah. I know people are taking breaks. And like I said, I'm shooting myself in the foot here because I need you all to watch these videos and to listen to the podcast. And I want you to. But also, if you have to get stuff done, you may have to limit those inputs. It'll relax your brain a little bit. You'll be able to focus on things a little bit more. I actually realized this in the last probably month or so. I've been listening to way too many podcasts. So like every time I'm working around the house, every time I'm walking outside, when I'm working out, I am watching YouTube. I am listening to a podcast. I'm listening to an audiobook. It's too much. So I realized I just need to walk outside and my brain has a chance to rest. And I felt a little bit better. I've actually gotten a little bit more work done. I would say fiction's probably okay. You know, if you are watching TV or movies or something, that's probably fine. If you're listening to fiction audiobooks or reading, I read a lot of fiction myself. Just finished the latest Stephen King book, Billy Summers, pretty good. So if you're reading fiction, that's probably all right. It does, I think, allow your brain to wander off into the areas that it usually doesn't get into. So I'm going to finish up answering these questions here. And thanks everyone for hopping on. Really appreciate it. Thanks everyone for liking the video that did. Last note that I do have the productivity masterclass with the bonus coaching out there that expires. That's just valid through the end of this week. So Friday, February 18th, 11:55 p.m. You can check out the link in the description here if you are interested. So let's see the last couple questions here. Some good ones that I may not be able to answer very well, but we'll talk through it. So Ahmed says, how do I forecast the projects for finance-wise, and how do you decide which project will be long-term or short-term? So forecasting projects can be a little bit difficult. So the best thing that you can do is make some assumptions about the project. Hopefully you have some specific budget. You just make it up, right? We could just work with, say you have $500 per month to work with initially. So you potentially could just, divide that up however you see fit. Maybe the first month is with infrastructure and stuff like hosting, the theme that you're going to use, maybe a couple plugins that you need to use. You get things set up that way. And then maybe you split your investment capital after that into like half link building, half content, or maybe like 80% for content and a little bit for link building, whatever makes sense for you. As far as projecting earnings, that is very difficult. The kind of baseline that I often give people, just because you need an answer, right, is it is not unusual to see someone start from scratch, hit $100 per month within 6 months or so. So give or take, that is not unusual. That is completely ignoring how much time and capital they're putting into it, how much content they're publishing, skill level. It's also putting aside the monetization, and it is also not considering the price of the products if it's like an affiliate product, for example. So if you just force me to answer, I would say, you could probably hit like $100 per month within 6 months, at about 6 months. After about a year, could be, 800, could be 1,000, could be 3,000, right? Again, we're ignoring how much effort we're putting in. We got a new interview coming out very soon, so certainly subscribe to the channel if you are not. I have an interview coming out, I think I'll check my Trello board up here, speaking of productivity. I think this interview might be coming out on Thursday. Yeah, on Thursday, someone hit 5K within 13 months. They put in a lot of effort, but we dig into it. And it's all informational content, like very, very low competition. So you maybe could hit 5K per month. And it's a little tough. The thing is, you make assumptions and you make a plan. Your plan is not going to be right. Your assumptions will also be wrong, right? It's part of what you do. It gives you a target to aim towards, and it gives you some baseline to get started. Once you get started and you go down the path, along that path, you will have a new perspective. And you'll see maybe a little bit further out. You'll be a little bit closer to some of the areas that you were looking at from way back there. And you're going to understand like what you're heading towards, and you could adjust along the way. So you make these plans and you make these assumptions knowing that they will be wrong. And it's okay. You're not like, they don't have to be right. You can only make those assumptions and make those plans based on what you know at the time. And once you get new information based on real world experience, then you can make better decisions moving forward. How do you decide if a project will be long or short term? Right now, me personally, I am generally not working on really short-term projects. I might do a sprint of work, and that would be for a short amount of time. But generally, I mean, I'm not doing short-term stuff. I've said this a lot of times, but if you can think about, especially for these websites, if you think about things in 4 to 6 years instead of 4 to 6 months, think of the wonderful decisions that you can make. Now, I know everyone doesn't have the luxury to look on timelines that long, but I mean, if you're going to work on something, you may as well work on something that you care about, that you're going to spend a little more time on in the future. And it's a little bit different than what other people are doing. So if everyone is aiming for that, 6-month to 12-month profitability, but you're looking on a longer timeline, you could do things in a much smarter way. Ahmed also says, what are the benchmarks you track each month for each site? So, I mean, you could look up some other KPIs, but I mean, mainly early on, you're going to look at the impressions on the Search Console, look at the number of clicks, probably look at the number of articles that you're publishing. As time goes on, I mean, you could look at page views, you could look at the number of sessions, you could look at the bounce rate, time on site. Generally, it's just the default stuff that you see on Google Analytics, that you see on any, reporting, whether you're using Ezoic or another display ad type company, or AdSense or whatever, or your Amazon reports or your other affiliate reports. So usually the most important shit that you should pay attention to is the default things that you see on your reporting. All right. And Michael says you're split across 6 projects right now, and you can completely validate that statement. Yeah. And the funny thing is, I think back to college as well, and I struggled when I had too many courses, and I mean, I took like some really hard classes, and sometimes I realized that I was basically I was in too many courses, and then like sometime in the future, I was like, I'm just going to take fewer courses and have like a minimum like full-time course load. And I did much better. Like I just had more time to work on this stuff. And, some people can, juggle a little bit more, but generally, just like Michael is agreeing to here, I mean, even if you can work on 6 projects and get it all done and do a pretty good job, what if you were just working on 3 projects and then you had more time to fuck around and have a nice time? Well, I mean, you may as well do the 3 project thing, right? And someday, maybe you're not in the position yet, Michael. Maybe you are. Maybe you can work on the 3 projects if you want to. But as time has gone on, I'm like, I could do less, and I am a little bit better off, a little bit happier because of it. Prussian says, do I have a video doing keyword research and writing articles? Yeah, I have them both. Thank you for asking that. You can go to the main channel page here and search. There's actually a couple live streams where I do keyword research. I use a couple different tools. I think I've used Ubersuggest. I've used KW Finder, maybe one other, but I think those are the two primary. So you could watch like a live demo where I go through it. And then writing articles, you may have to search a little bit more, but if you look for writing articles and content and stuff like that, there are probably a couple live streams at least where I go through like an actual example. And then there are some shorter videos, probably in the 10 to 15 minute range, where I also talk about content. And that'll get you, that should be enough to get you started. And as we're wrapping it up, I think we made it through, and we had more people today. So I think this is probably a good time for us to do these live streams, and I do them every week. So if you're not subscribed for some reason, you can definitely check that out. All right. So Laughing Hyena says, what are some essential plugins that I suggest for all sites? Well, I don't like plugins much, so there's not too many. And I don't have the list imprinted on my brain, so I'm probably gonna forget some. People, feel free to list some of your essential plugins to give us something to talk about here. Number one, I do offsite backups using Managed WP. It's very cheap. Everyone should do offsite backups. It's only like, I think it's like $1.80 per month per site, and it's offsite. It's very important to have offsite, and you could set it up for daily backup. So if there's any kind of screw up, you can roll it back. I also use a plugin that changes the login screen or the login URL. So instead of domain.com/wp-login.php, it's some other random thing that I made up. So you get far fewer, potentially zero brute force type attacks because any hackers don't know what URL to go to. So it's pretty helpful. I think it's called a Kismet, that reduces comment spam, which is very helpful. I don't think it's necessarily required, but if you want to use an SEO plugin, Rank Math seems to be very good, and that's the one I have been using more recently. These couple are not essential, but I find them helpful. There's a modular content plugin and a YouTube performance plugin that allows you to embed YouTube videos. Those are both by DIY Plugins, which is an offshoot of DIY Themes, which is the creator of Thesis, which is the WordPress theme that I use. It's actually a framework, and the actual theme is the Focus WordPress theme. And I use that over on Niche Site Project, and I also use it for the Doug.Show podcast. And oh yeah, and Duke says it's a WPS hide login. Great. Yeah, that's the one. And I think there's probably a couple more, but minimal plugins. Hate plugins. They just slow your site down and represent a place where bugs could show up or security issues could show up. Michael says you've been doing this kind of work for 20 years, so you're in the group of people, but it's a drain and a personal sacrifice you choose, and 4 to 5 year view and goals is key, bit by bit. Yeah. All right, so I think that's it for today. Thanks everybody for hopping on. Like I said, this time seemed to work out pretty well. A lot of times I struggle to do this on a Tuesday at this time, but this worked out pretty well. So thanks everyone, and we'll catch you next week, and certainly check out the podcast as well. I'll talk a lot about the same